Hello. This is an introduction to the main features of Insidious 6581. I'll be doing some other videos which will have more detailed information about various sections and how to get the most out of it, but this is just a basic overview of the main functions and how it works. So, the first thing, you can see the 3 channels here that correspond to each of the SID chip's 3 channels, and a filter section up at the top. And you can route any of the channels, or all of the channels, into the filter. The first thing you should do is switch on, or make sure you've got switched on the pop-up help there, which will give you help over any of the parameters and controls and everything. Everything's got instructions built in. So starting at the top left, we can see that we have a MIDI value. If you hold down the left mouse button and just drag up and down, you can change the MIDI channel, which applies to this audio channel. So you can set that to, for example, 1, 2 and 3 for each of those, and in your workstation you can just route your MIDI data into the single instance of Reactor, and then you can play each of the individual channels just like a Commodore 64 would on different MIDI channels. Not to say the Commodore 64 used MIDI, but nevertheless, that's the idea. So under here we have a status indicator which tells you if the channel is working or not. It'll be red if it's muted, or if you've set no waveform in the table here, because here is how you set the root waveform. Also, you can double click on that, and if you have a stuck note, that will send a note off, so it will release that note. This is the modulation wheel, and you can choose where to send the modulation parameter from the wheel on your keyboard to PWM, pulse width modulation, pitch or volume. Clock is a setting which sets how often the modulation from the LFOs and the envelopes updates. Now, ordinarily a reactor will update 200 Hz, I think, that's 200 times a second, but you can set it to be much higher. What this will do, this will restrict all the updates to 50 or 60 or some of the other parameters. Generally 50 or 60 gives you the best result, that makes it the most 8-bit sounding. And generally I'll keep that on 50, makes it sound just that little bit more Commodore 64. Because it's slightly less smooth, you'll get some stepping between the modulation parameters. Here we have the volume ADSR, which is just like any standard ADSR on any synthesizer you'll get. Up here we have the root pitch. In these 3 sections you can change the octave. Again, standard synth parameters, you'll get these on everything. And then you've got a fine-tune value here. And beneath that we can set the bend range for the pitch bend wheel on your keyboard. We have a portamento parameter for gliding between notes. And this is our root pulse width. Let me disable this. So we've got our square wave set to 0, and that value sets the width of the pulse. Down here we have some root parameters. Key sets whether the sound follows the keyboard or not. It will just set itself to the root pitch plus some of the operational parameters there and ignore the notes on the keyboard every time it receives a note. Filter will route this sound through the filter over here. And then we have ring and hard sync. If you switch these on, it will activate the ring modulation or the hard sync. And for those to operate, you need to use that in unison with one of the other channels. Over here we have the modulation section. This is for pulse width modulation, which is that, but this allows you to modulate it automatically. And you can see down here we have a little indicator showing the current pulse width value. The reason for that is because we can set the depth to 1 and this will cross the full pulse width range. But then if I adjust the root parameter here, we can make it go off the end. That's useful just to see what's going on. Sometimes you might have set up a sound and you can't understand why you can't hear it. Well, it might be that the pulse width have been set too severely and you get no sound playback in that case. Well, this just shows you what's happening there. The same thing applies for the pitch and the amplitude. We've got various controls there, which I'll demonstrate on a later video in more detail. And behind these two, we have an envelope parameter where we can set an envelope for pitch or pulse width there. This is the table. Now, the most fundamental thing you need to know is that our waveform is chosen in this first step of the table here. And we can set another pitch independently of this. It will be additional, so if you set the note pitch here, you can set pitch. We can also set the pulse width as long as the pulse waveform is selected. And the table is used to step in time, so we can change parameters each note that we play, but I'll go into that in a different video. The speed and the loop parameters are for the table, and here we have a play mode. So solo mode will re-trigger the volume envelope every time it receives a note. Let me just get rid of that. There we are. So even if I press two notes at once, if the notes overlap, it will still re-trigger the volume. I can put some portamento on. Legato mode will not re-trigger the envelope if two notes overlap. And then we have live ARP, which allows you to hold a chord and that's a very typical 8-bit sound, very commonly associated with chiptunes, and that just allows you to play with it in real time. It's quite nice to do. Okay, that's about it. I will see you in another video, so thanks for watching.